All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have the honor of welcoming Bobby Belt from 105.3 The Fan, as well as a draft extraordinaire, one of my personal favorite media members. And I know that you're a big Dak guy, and I know that you're someone that's more connected and more closely connected to the star. I wanted to dive into, I ain't trying to get you fired, I ain't trying to get you in trouble or nothing, but I wanted to kind of dive into some of the things you talked about because me personally, I talked about the things with Mike McCarthy. On my channel as well, and how I kind of felt like he was intent on dying on his own shield. But before we get into all of that, let's talk about Zack Martin. Zack Martin, where do we go from here? How do you feel about it? And just kind of, was this expected from the Cowboys' perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was at least a question as to whether he would keep playing. But I mean, I think they knew it wasn't going to be here in Dallas. So it was a situation where Zack Martin, I think they knew that divorce was on its way, either because they were going to need to, find other opportunities and let him go on his way, a la Tyron Smith, or he was going to retire. And so ultimately he chose to retire. We got a chance to talk to him, Zack Martin, out at Super Bowl, and it sounded like he was at least trying to figure out a way to see if he could play next year, trying to get healthy, and ultimately decided that it was time to hang it up. And I mean, it all happened in a flash. It seems like just yesterday he was picked in 2014, and now we've run through his entire career. And I mean, he will go down as, to me, probably the greatest Cowboys player never to win a Super Bowl.
Ooh, that's a big one. There's some names on that list. There are some serious names on that list, but you know what? I think just overall, when you looking at the resume, when you looked at that stat that I think I saw you put out as far as he has as many all-pros as he has accepted holding penalties. That's insane, right? So it's hard to really argue that. Zack Martin is going to be missed, but I think a lot of us were kind of bracing for this. From the moment we saw the different production, it just kind of like, it felt like he lost a step, and when guys get to that point in their career and he's upper in age and the franchise is kind of in flux and you really don't know how things are going to look, where things are going, I just don't know if the motivation was there. Do you feel like it was more of a function of the health issue, or he just didn't feel the drive to do it anymore?
No, I mean, look, I think he's had his eyes on the end for a couple of years now. That's why he held out and wanted to get one more payday. And I think that's why he, he talked routinely about, you can kind of see the end and the end is near. And I mean, when he gave his last press conference after they announced his season-ending surgery, he was shaking the hands of all the media members at his locker. So that felt like he knew he wasn't going to be here. I don't know that it's a lack of passion or a lack of drive or anything else. I think injuries are stacking up. He's experiencing a decline in play, and those probably go hand in hand. But I mean, he was you watched on tape last year against Detroit, and there were two different times where he punched himself in the helmet for missing something. And I mean, that's usually a sign of a poor player when you see an offensive lineman punching themselves in the helmet. And that was the first time I'd ever seen Zack Martin do it. And I think it was just, when Father Time comes calling, it can be quick. And I think it was really quick with Zack Martin.
Okay, I understand that, man. I think we can't really be mad at anything Zack gave the organization or anything, but where do we go from here? Are they going to be looking to move Hoffman into that position? Are they comfortable doing that? Or are we looking at like an outside option, like a Will Hernandez, someone that played under Clayton Adams, coming off that injury, so he'll kind of be in that Stephen Jones budget discount type of option area? What are we looking at there?
Yeah, it's a little early to know who are going to be Clayton Adams' favorites on the roster, who are going to be Connor Riley's favorite on the roster. You would have a pretty good feeling of Brock Hoffman's going to get opportunity because everybody knew Mike Solari really liked Brock Hoffman.
Right.
Back in the day, everybody knew Terrence Steele was getting opportunity because Terrence Steele was somebody that Joe Philbin felt really strongly about. I'm sure as we go through the process and get through the summer, we're going to start hearing about guys that Riley likes, or we're going to hear about guys that Clayton Adams likes. I would imagine they're going to cover their bases and go sign some contingency plan in the offseason, but not as this guy's the ironclad starter, more like when they go get Chuma Edoga or a player like that where they're brought in for competition. But I mean, I think that my guess would be you probably go with Brock Hoffman, especially with as much as everybody's talked about nastiness and intensity and football character, this coaching staff in terms of what matters to them. And so I would guess it would be Hoffman, but I mean that right now it's just a guess based on what they've told us they like, because Adams and Riley and these guys, when they get in here, they may have a different view of who they like. They may really like TJ Bass. They may really like Awesome Richards playing inside. So that remains to be seen. I would imagine it'll be an internal candidate, and likely not a rookie is what I would guess.
Okay. That makes perfect sense. Now, with that being said, since we kind of got into this conversation a little bit, and actually, before we go into the free agency deal, because obviously there's still a lot up in the air, nothing definite that you can tell us. It's really just all speculation. I want to talk about something that's kind of been a subject of conversation over the last week or so, right? And it's this Micah Parsons trade stuff. Yep. And I just kind of want to know, A, where do you stand as it pertains to, does the off the field stuff with Micah Parsons, does that bother you at all? And B, do you feel like Micah Parsons and maybe how he goes about his business, kind of his unpredictability, do you feel as if that bothers anybody maybe inside the organization at all?
I mean, I think it definitely has throughout his time. I don't know that it was as much of an issue last year. I think they felt like he and Zimmer got along really well, and Zimmer helped him buy into a lot of the different ideas and concepts about, remaining gap disciplined and staying home and not just saying to hell with all this, I'm going to rush. Right. So I think that, there were signs of maturity last year for them. But I mean, the reality is he's a young, brash player who was going to go through a lot of, I don't want to say growing pains, but I mean, he was going to go through a maturation process like all players do. Right. So to the question of trading him, I think we talked about this on the air a couple weeks ago. When the report came out that they've asked the question internally of what could we get for him, whatever else, I would hope they ask that of everybody. I want them to keep Dak Prescott. I would hope they ask themselves, what could we get for Dak Prescott? Just because they need to say, these are all these things. Not necessarily that they go shop him, but they just say, this is what we think we could get for him. This is what it would cost to pay him. This is how we'd have to replace him. Because you need to look at all of that when you're making a decision. I would think it'd be negligence if they didn't ask themselves, what could we get for Micah Parsons? And we went through the exercise on the air. We went and did like 5 or 6 trades. Like, this is a reasonable return from some of these teams. Yeah. And would you take any of these trades? Or which one of these trades would you take? And when you pick that trade, would you take it over signing Micah Parsons? And it was no. I probably wouldn't take it over just signing Micah Parsons. But I think you have to ask that question, especially when you've got so much money committed to so many different players right now. Now, if you re-sign Micah Parsons, you have a decision probably about Deron Bland, or maybe you have a tough decision about Tyler Smith. I don't think they want to walk away from Tyler Smith, but just numbers start getting tough. Or maybe just say, we got to figure out a way to get out from under the Trayvon Diggs contract.
I was just about to say that Diggs. I was just about to say that because Diggs to me has been someone that I feel like has kind of fallen out of favor a little bit just by kind of paying attention to some of the smoke trails that have come out of the star a little bit, and some of the conversations that you just kind of like, where did that come from? As far as like, we were unhappy with how he approached X, Y, and Z as far as his rehab, and and just kind of seeing how Diggs kind of carries himself, and then the injury history and starting to build up, and it's like, okay. Diggs may be one of those guys that I'm not sure how much longer we're going to see him in the Cowboys uniform, personally.
Yeah, I think the injury complicates any opportunity that they would want to move on from him if they wanted to evaluate that this offseason. So that's probably going to slow it down if they were considering that. I also think it's important to remember that, when noise comes out of the star about a player or about a coach or anything else, I don't think anybody's lying to you usually. I think somebody is telling you what they've heard from someone who's there. It's just, you got to remember, there's 53 players. There's a bunch of executives. Yeah. There's a bunch of coaches. That may be the opinion of 1 or 2 people that you talk to, and it's not the opinion of the vast majority of people. So I'm sure there are people who are unhappy with the way Diggs approached his rehab. I'm sure there are other people who it wasn't a big issue for them. It may be the case where unanimously everybody was upset with it, but I think it's just important to take it in the context of, this is at least a representation from some people inside the building, and others may have a counter view of it. But I do think that if they look at Bland and Diggs and say, if we can only commit money to one of them, we'd rather just trade Diggs and then commit more money to Bland, or just let Bland walk. I think right now this team, this organization would say, we'd prefer Bland. So is there a way that we can keep him and maybe move off of that contract?
Right. That makes sense. Okay. So I want to know, like, you're a Cowboys fan, right? You consider yourself
a Cowboys fan? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I always clarify. I grew up a Cowboys fan. Once you get to the point where you're covering it, like you have to be objective. Fandom's got to be checked at the door. And so covering it professionally on the beat, you do have to kind of divorce yourself from that in your reporting. But yeah, I mean, I grew up a Cowboys fan. I'm wearing a Cowboys hoodie right now. So
okay, so let's move away from the reporting. I want to hear from Bobby Belt, the Cowboys fan. I want to hear from you right now. When you look at this team, when you look at the things going on around this team, like what is the actual thing that you feel like is frustrating you, the controllables? Because it's senseless to be upset and just continuously crying about Jerry and how Jerry does things. And it's senseless to look at those type of things. Like what are the things that really bothers you when you look at this team that really worries you?
Yeah, so I agree. I think based on how you just said that, I think we agree in the sense that you can feel like Jerry's a problem. To me, it's wasted breath a lot of times because it's like he's not. Whenever I see, hey, we're gonna, let's start a fire Jerry the GM campaign, or whenever they tell us to ask him,
Come on, man.
He's
I'm not, like, get out of here with that. I don't want
to. He's not gonna do it, and so I mean, we can say that, but I mean, it's like, well, we should. Wouldn't it be nice if we had $1 million? Yeah, it'd be great, but like you don't. So, like, let's talk about actual solutions for how to try to attack this and work around. So, I mean, it's no secret. My biggest issue, my biggest line item was I didn't think Mike McCarthy was the right coach for this team. I don't think he set in place a healthy culture. I think a lot of what was said was out of politeness, I think, publicly near the end. And I think the more you've seen the transition over to Schottenheimer, when they are underlining 3 times and bold print and all that, the idea of Schottenheimer was brought here for culture. Well, then you got to naturally deduce the culture was broken and there was something wrong with it. Zack Martin told us at Super Bowl, something was clearly off with the culture last year. All the players who keep talking, none of them are trashing Mike McCarthy or anything like that. I don't want to make it sound like that.
Right.
But they are all leveling criticisms or pointing to things that Mike McCarthy was responsible for. So to me, I mean, that was the biggest line item for me. But there are obviously other issues that they're an aging roster. Dak's becoming more injury prone, it feels like. If Dak gets seriously hurt this year, you're going to have to start asking questions about if he can be the guy moving forward. Not because of ability, but just because of availability.
I'm one of the biggest Dak guys there is, man. And that would be one of the coldest days that I would have to experience. Because, yes, if he gets injured in a serious way next season, man, you got to come and be like, all right, guys, let's be objective here. Put my fanboy hat aside. Come on now. What are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, you're honestly getting to the point of Dak's career that you probably got the day you drafted Zack Martin, where you were prioritizing how do we keep Romo upright? How do we extend his career? You're probably asking yourself, how do we keep Dak upright? How do we extend his career? Right. And so, because you got to remember, he's not a young guy anymore. I mean, he's by NFL standards. I was about to say we the same age, man. Hold on, Bobby. Hold on. I know. He'll be 32 by the time the season starts, which again. It's not old, but I mean, by NFL standards, that's a lot of punishment on his body that he's taken. And he's been a physical player for a lot of his career. So I think injuries are starting to stack up. I think their window's just closing for the core's talent. I think their window's closing. So to me, the biggest thing is you need to have a recognition that this core probably isn't enough. So you need to add, if you're really about now, you need to add win now players in the draft. If you're about being in a semi rebuild, then you need to be acquiring more picks. You don't need to be trading fourths for Jonathan Mingo and Trey Lance and those sort of things. And so, to me, like I said, I think the reset with the coaching staff was important. Not all of them, but I mean, I think the head coach and a lot of the assistants, the refresh is going to be helpful. And I think that the Cowboys just need to be realistic about how good is their core and how much time do they have left. Because I think if they were soberly looking at that, they'd know it's not very long.
Right. I think that's, I agree. I agree with you. And I do look at the same way as you as far as the Jerry thing and trying to look at stuff that are actual actionable things that you can fix right now. Like Jerry ain't going anywhere. He's here. He's like a root. He's going to stay right where he is. You can cut the tree trunk all you want. That root's there, man. So
it's like saying trade Dak. It's like saying trade Dak. Even if
no trade clause,
I mean, you can't get off the contract right now anyway.
Yeah. So and who would take it?
That's great. You want to do that, but okay, that's not possible. So let's start talking about other things.
Right. So I want you to put your GM cap on. If we go into free agency, I want you to give me 2 perspectives here. One, first kind of address what kind of approach do you think the Cowboys are going to have. Did you hear a difference in tone from Jerry? Because you speak to Jerry and Steven a lot, right? And this is something I've been kind of clinging on to, looking for a little bit of hope as a Cowboys fan. Something to be excited about. It's been a long season. Covering the team has been a long season. Been trying to be excited about something. And I kind of heard Jerry and Steven. It sounded like they had a different tone in that introductory press conference with Brian Schottenheimer. It kind of sounded like they were almost admitting about as much as we would get from them that they were wrong in some ways as far as their approach. Did you kind of get that sense that they were kind of like, all right, we got to go back to the drawing board a little bit here? And have you heard that same tone? Was that kind of just the snake oil salesman bit, or do you feel like it was genuine?
No, I mean, I think there may be some level of regret in the tone of their voice, but I don't think it's I don't think it's in the sense of, so we're going to change and sign a bunch of people this offseason. I think it's more regret for how they managed the cap a few years leading up to it and all the switches they flipped and all the things they did to create space. And that now they feel like last year and this year, they're going to have to, no matter what they'd like to do, they have to sit there and weather this financial storm. Jerry would have wanted to, like, I mean, the biggest misnomer everybody throws out there about Derrick Henry last year, just like, oh, why wouldn't they gone after Jerry? Would have loved to have had Derrick Henry here. Jerry was told by people that manage their financial situation, we can't do it. So Jerry goes, okay, I'm being told we can't do it, so I guess we can't do it. And I think that's why he got frustrated when the question came up so frequently, is because he agreed. He agreed that he wanted to sign him. And so I think that was the tough thing about it. But that's where some of that regret comes in for them, I think, is more just, did we manage, when we tried to aggressively open up a window to go acquire Gilmore, Cooks, get some more veterans in here by flipping switches and creating cap space, right. Should we have been more measured with that so that we didn't have to take a bath right now? And so, I don't think that's less the tone of, honey, I promise I'm going to change, and more like, oh, what could have been, there's the one that got away.
Okay. Well, damn it, Bobby, you just... Yeah, I have to put my hand kill out on you.
They're not going to spend a lot.
I don't think that. First of all, that's unreasonable, because if you really break it down, yes, they can create all of this money through restructures and flip switches, and we've seen the breakdowns of all the the Twitter analysts and stuff. It gets up to between 96 to 106 million. You can open up by doing some things with the salary cap. We get that. Even if you look at it, though, they have 22 unrestricted, restricted, or voided contracts this offseason. Yeah. So they would have to use majority of that cap, just making sure that they have a tenable roster. So it's not like they would have all this money to go out and get a bunch of free agents anyways. I understand that part. But I'm looking at guys like maybe a Grady Jarrett coming off of a post-June first cut, or a Trevon Moehrig, or some of these guys around that 12, 13, $14 million per year range. Are we going to see any of those type of moves? Maybe even something equivalent to a Brandon Cook, Stephon Gilmore type of offseason.
I don't know. I do think they want to see more from Mingo. So if we're just talking about receiver, I do think they want to see that. And look, I mean, I think that was an area of tension for them. I think they went out there, they acquired a player, and then Mike McCarthy wouldn't play him. And I think they were frustrated with I do think that was an area where they were frustrated with Mike McCarthy at the end of the year. Was, we made this acquisition, you need to put him out there. And it was,
interesting.
He's got to learn route trees, and he's got to do things like this. It's like, yeah, but he knows basic route concepts. You can put him out there for 6 or 7 plays and give him some run. It's like when Amari Cooper scored on his first game with Buffalo, and Keon Coleman had to tell him the route. But they didn't say, we're just not going to put Amari Cooper out there because we acquired him midseason. So I do think they want to see what Jonathan Mingo can do when he's got the offseason and they're really committing to using him. I don't know if there's a lot of optimism about that working out, but I think they at least want to see that through. And then, I would not expect them to play in the $12 to $14 million range, unless it's just finagled a certain way and structured a certain way that it looks more like funny money. But I mean, to me, I think that, the salary cap being higher than they thought it was going to be and different things like that, I think that might just only encourage them to say, instead of saying, oh, we have $16 million more dollars to spend, I think they might look at it as, we have $16 million worth of fewer switches we have to flip. Maybe we can just, but maybe we can just take some of Dak's $16 million this year instead of pushing more problems down the road with Dak's deal. Let's eat some of it this year, which I get. I get the philosophy of saying, let's not bloat Dak's cap number anymore, because it's 89 this year. All right, well, if you keep doing restructures, it's going to keep going up.
Yeah.
And we're going to keep talking about a giant number every year. So the less they can do that, I think the more they're happy. And again, like you mentioned, you can flip a bunch of switches to get $100 million worth of cap room. You can also have an $8,000 credit card bill at 5% interest. And if you go take out an $8,000 loan at 10% interest, it's like, oh, I have $8,000. Yeah, but not really. You actually just cost yourself more money into the future. Yeah. And so I think their strategy, I mean, it really is, NFL salary cap really is like economics, where it's not just, well, this is the way it is, this is the rule, and that's what, there are differing opinions on what those switches you flip and how it impacts things and how you can navigate it. And you can feel like some is right and some is wrong, but it's similar, like I say, to economics, where a lot of it is perspective and how it affects things moving forward and the impact that it can have on it.
Okay, so really what we're seeing with the GMs is just everyone kind of having a competition of seeing whose capology methodology works the best. Essentially, that's what we're looking at.
Look, and the Cowboys do have to. The Cowboys last summer around this time thought the cap this year was going to go up $10 million. Right. It's going to go up about 26. Right. They probably do need to get answers from people that told them that within the organization and say, why did you miss this so bad? And so I'm not going to fault somebody for having the wrong projection, or in terms of if the Cowboys had a wrong projection because that's something that they were given by people they had in place. All right, well, they were just going off of experts that they put in place. But that can't just be, well, it's not my fault. It needs to be, okay, I'll own it because I made the decision. But now I need answers from the guy that told me this, or from the couple of people that told me this, and they need to clarify to me, why did we get this so wrong?
That's deep. That's deep. I think that's a layer that a lot of people don't really discuss. I think we just stop at pointing the finger at Jerry Stephen. Oh, Jerry Stephen, they don't know what they're doing. And you don't really think about the extra layers because they do have people in place that are employed under them to do specific parts of the job.
Yeah, so, which, I mean, it's... I routinely quote the movie A Bug's Life when it comes to Jerry or the NFL or anything else, where what the princess ant in that Pixar movie from years ago says, it's not my fault, and he cuts her off and he says, first rule of leadership, everything's your fault. And that's the thing. And I think Jerry, that's why he says, it's me. Anything, put it on me. And so that's fair. He can shoulder it. All right, but the accountability needs to come from, all right, now you need to get answers from the people you trusted, and you need to evaluate, do I just feel comfortable with this arrangement, or is this the best arrangement? Does this give us the best chance? Do I need to get uncomfortable to give us the best chance and maybe make a move here because I need somebody different? And again, I'm not calling for anybody's job or anything like that. I'm just saying those questions at least need to be asked. You need to make the evaluation just like you make the evaluation. What can we get from Micah Parsons? Is that better than signing him? Like, you need to ask those questions.
Okay. All right. So let's say Jerry Jones caught a bad case of dementia, God forbid, and he called you up and was like, Bobby, I need you to be the GM this summer. I just can't do it. My kids, they're out on me. They've run astray. I need you to be the GM. I want you to handle free agency and the draft. What are we doing? What are Cowboys fans looking forward to from a Bobby Belt GM, summer of GM?
So if I'm the GM, do I still have Will McClay?
Yes.
All right, then I'm just turning over the draft to Will and the scout.
No, never mind. I'll take over.
No, the draft. I am. I'm saying I'm not going to let the coaches have a say. The coaches can tell you the things they like. Okay. They need to go pick it. You know, you can say it's like a stylist. You can tell a stylist the interests that you have, things like that, but they're going to go out there and they're going to shop for you, and they're going to determine what actually meets that standard. And I think that's why I would trust implicitly the scouting staff and Will McClay on that. So, I mean, you can't go wrong with just pick a good, like pick whatever is at the top of your board in each round. You can't go wrong because you need everything and you need depth everywhere. So the draft is a little more complex to me or is a little bit more just like cut and dry, like this is the way it goes, than something like free agency, where you just have to start making measured decisions about, do I trust Terrence Steele is going to bounce back now that he's working with a different coach, since a lot of people felt like Mike Solari wasn't beneficial to him? Do I feel like Tyler Guyton can bounce back? Do I feel like I saw enough from, like, those are just evaluations that you're going to have to make. And then once you make those, you go, okay, where do I add depth behind? I would try to probably I would probably let, and I love him as a player, but I would probably let Osa go. Just because of
that 20 mil,
the amount of money that it'll take.
Yep.
And not, again, he's a really good player. I'd love to have him back here. If they had all the financial capabilities to do it, I would. I'd probably try to bring back Chauncey Golston, try to bring back Carl Lawson, get some of those cheaper deals, try to restructure as few things as I can, because I need to get out of the side of this season. I don't need to push the can down the road anymore, because if I push the can down the road anymore, then when this core is another year older and I don't have any way to add any more talent around them from veterans, I've got to have access to that into the future. I would start just looking at what are the options for some of these veterans if I did want to move them. Like, just find out what is Trayvon Diggs' value. Again, you don't have to move Micah Parsons, but go find out what it would get you. Don't do the Luka Doncic. Don't call the Los Angeles Lakers and say, "Hey, wouldn't it be funny if I gave you Luka?" Don't do that. Like, just just cover your base. This is an organization that has said due diligence more than anybody else in the history of the English language.
Yeah.
Go do your due diligence and just find out what that is, just so you can ask yourself the question. And you'll probably still end up with, we should keep Micah, but at least go find out. So I think that I would check on a lot of this, but I think I'm restructuring as little as possible. I'm wanting to make sure Jordan Lewis is back here. I'd probably sign him at whatever it would take. And I'm going to just go scrounge around looking for value linebackers. And I know that's something that a lot of people haven't liked in the past, but to me, Eberflus's system and what they're trying to do with Aaron White Cotton and so much of the attacking style on the defensive front, and the, secondary being pretty talented overall, even if they've got their flaws, then to me it's like, okay, go dip in the value bin and just go find me smart, competent players.
Right.
If you find me smart, competent linebackers who maybe aren't the most athletic or whatever else, and so there may be a cheaper value on them, just focus on maybe rebuilding that defensive line in terms of re-signing the guys you need to re-sign. Maybe you pick a guy like Walter Nolan in the first round. Maybe just add wherever else, rebuild the trenches on the defensive line, and make sure that attacking front just makes it so that the linebackers have the ability to be disciplined and not play in over pursuit. Just find me the high energy disciplined player. Okay. And that sounds really simple and basic, but to me, I think you populate your linebackers with that. Because you don't know what Overshown's going to be when he comes back.
How do you feel about like a TJ Edwards or a Tremaine Edmonds from the Bears? I think both of them are potential cut candidates for them.
Edmonds, I can't recall like how he's played in the last couple of years. Obviously, I'm not studying them regularly. Yeah. Edwards, I do remember having to study him in a couple different games for Dallas, and I remember thinking that's a solid player.
Yeah,
but
he's
the
around
question is obviously going to be, is he aging? Is he starting to get dinged up with those injuries? And so. Right. Look, I mean, we'll be in Indianapolis next week for the Combine. All this chatter is going to start coming out, and you're going to start getting a sense of what they want to target in free agency and do different things. But I think, I would be in favor of maybe go find a value receiver. Maybe you go say, I'm going to roll the dice for this year and trust that Cooper Kupp's going to be healthy, and I'll make a deal to try and go get him. I'm gonna do the value linebackers.
There you go.
That's more the direction that I would play, and just really look to use your biggest and most expensive capital, whether it's draft capital or your biggest free agent. Just try to rebuild the defensive and offensive lines.
Okay. So in the draft, you're going trenches mainly. You're trying to restructure the trenches through the draft. Is what you're saying?
I don't think you can go wrong really picking anything. But to me, if Matt Eberflus's style is so particular. And I think we saw how damaging it can be when the offensive line isn't playing at a high level. That to me, it's so basic and so cliche. But like the trenches are a cliche for a reason. Of you win in the trenches, because that is so frequently what Philly just won the Super Bowl in large part because they could rush with 4 and they could get home. The Giants took down the Patriots twice in large part because they could rush 4 and get home. San Francisco's been really talented for a number of years because they can rush 4 and get home. So I think rebuilding that defensive line is huge, and getting that attacking style in place, and then just making sure, find out for sure that Tyler Guyton's the guy you think he is.
Yeah.
Continue to see the progression from Beebe. If Hoffman brings you a nastiness and a tenacity, all right, make sure he's there. Is Terrence Steele fully rehabbed? Was his growth stunted, or is he declining? You got to get answers on the tackles and then figure out what you want to do from there. So I think for me, top 3 rounds, I'm probably looking at a defensive lineman, some sort of skill position player, whether that's a dynamic tight end, back, receiver, whatever it is.
Okay.
And then evaluate if you want to double down on. So if you feel like you don't have a steady answer on the offensive line, throw capital at that. If that is stable, you feel like that is good, then I'd probably double down on defensive line.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I think I'm just at a place, man. I just don't. That first round pick, I need to be something sexy, man. We haven't had a sexy first round pick since CD, essentially. I need it to be something sexy. I think we need skill position players, because being able to block and being able to stop the run is fine. But if you don't have guys out there that can make plays, man, then what are we doing? At the end of the day, you look at the Super Bowl teams and the teams that are winning. Those teams have weapons. They have guys that can make plays. And if you go out and get a Cooper Kupp and he's kind of taking the place of a Brandon Cooks on the roster type of a situation, and then we're running out there with Jalen Tolbert and Jalen Brooks again, I'm just not sure. I mean, should we be better? Yes. But I'm not sure that's going to, we would have to get a stud running back. And it doesn't have to be Genty. It can be a guy in the second or third, but we'd have to get a stud for sure.
If they really believe in Mingo as a guy that they think they can elevate not as a 2, not as a 2, but if they believe they can go Kupp, Lamb, and I don't know that they would go after Kupp, but this is just as a They believe they could go Kupp, Lamb, and then just, hey, let's let cream rise to the top between Tolbert, Brooks, and Mingo and figure it out. And then if you want to throw or I shouldn't even discount Flournoy or anybody like that. I mean, they find out who one of those 3 can be. And if you get the sense that it's not working out, do what you've done in the past. You walked into training camp and said, the safeties aren't as good as I thought. Go sign Malik Hooker a couple days into training camp. The linebackers aren't as good as I thought. We need to go get Anthony Barr, sign him a couple days in camp. The defensive line isn't as good. We need to go get Carl Lawson. Like, if you find that that's the case, make that determination really quick when you get to training camp and start rushing to go, okay, we got to find a third receiver, whether that's trade or free agency. Just, you got to start throwing darts at it. But it's tough. There's so many different things that they need, and there's such little draft capital to be able to do it.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you, Bobby. I'm going to ask you one last question real quick before we get you up out of here, man. I know you're a busy man. What do you think will be, if you had to predict it right now, what do you think will be the single biggest change on this team between last season and now that Schottenheimer is in charge? Just your prediction, just based off of the information we have right now. Just the information we have right now based off the people they are, the schemes, everything like that. Whether it be culturally, schematically, whatever. Yeah,
I do think that they're going to be more committed to running the ball. I think the run concepts are going to look more. It's going to look similar to what you see from the Rams and the 49ers. Again, doesn't mean their success is going to be that, because they may not have the play, but the style, the scheme is going to look more like that, because I think that was something Schottenheimer really wanted to put in place, and that was something where you had some friction between McCarthy and him at times. So I think that'll be a change. Honestly, though, I mean, with how much Schottenheimer's hammered it, it may not be a tangible thing that you will see.
Right.
But I do think the culture is going to be better. And I think if that culture is better, that's going to be a difference, because people are going to be more focused and locked in. Does that mean they are a 10-win team? No, they could finish below 500. They could miss the playoffs and still have their culture better. So that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to add up to success right away, but it's something that was broken and needs to be fixed, and I think it's going to be better.
Okay, good enough. Well, I appreciate you taking time out to come talk with the nation, man. Appreciate you for joining Attack on Cowboys. My first time being able to interact with you, man. I really appreciate it. You have a great day, and as we always end these shows off, how about them Cowboys, man?
How about them Cowboys?
Yeah, there you go, man.
Calling me, texting me, paging me, asking me, am I still the ball? Y'all usually check on me. Listen. I'm still them boys.